Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. So I was just watching rewatching basically the debate on Trainwrecks TV between Sargon and Nick Fuentes versus Destiny and Hassan Piker. It's actually a really interesting debate between some decently sized names on Twitch and YouTube, and I thought it was in general, I really liked that debate. I liked a lot of the topics that were discussed. I found it to be a really interesting thing to watch. So I was rewatching that, and Sargon made this point in the video that I think displays a really bad sign about the culture and about how people think about different ethical issues and issues related to like morality and what sort of duties we have, I guess. His basic question was, do we have an obligation to make sure civilization continues? Basically, do we have an obligation, or that was his question. And this basically is the question of, should we require that or encourage women to have more children so that civilization continues? And this is a very, very, very toxic question to ask. The idea that you should sacrifice or you have some sort of duty to prolong the human race or to have more generations in the future, or give civilization to future generations. That's a very fallacious way of thinking and ultimately very toxic, because it tells you, essentially what it tells you to do is to sacrifice yourself, your life, your happiness for people who don't even exist yet. Because these people in future generations, they don't exist. So to say that like, oh, you should sacrifice for these people, they're not actual people. They're not people that exist. I think in the debate he brought up the point of, oh, but I mean, what if your ancestors didn't preserve civilization for you? Well, I didn't exist back then. And there's no, I mean, it's such an absurd argument. I didn't exist back then, and these future generations of people don't exist. They're not people that are actually real. And if I didn't exist, that would mean absolutely nothing. Then I just wouldn't exist. There would be no consciousness that's like having these thoughts, having any of these sort of opinions. It's kind of like one of those fallacious type things, which is similar to thinking about like, oh, what about all the infinite number of possible people that don't exist? Like, it's absolutely absurd. You can get into some really deep intellectual rabbit holes that you don't want to go down if you start thinking about things that don't exist. I mean, it's such a waste of time to occupy your thoughts with that. But this is like blatant altruism, blatant sacrifice yourself for nothing. It's absolute nihilism, the idea that you have to sacrifice for future generations, because you're sacrificing yourself, your life, for nothing, for something that doesn't exist. So it's extremely toxic to think this way. It's not. It's directly saying that you need to sacrifice your life and your happiness for something that doesn't exist. The only duty that you should have is to yourself, to your own life, because that's the only life you'll experience. That's the only life that you directly control, and that's the only life that you have the mental faculty to pursue, to achieve. You can only achieve your own values. You can only experience your own emotions. You have no duty to other people, no duty to future generations which don't actually exist. So yeah, it's so damaging to think this way, because I mean, it's so directly, this is what leads to collectivistic thought. This is what leads to things like Nazi Germany, for example. This type of thought will lead you to thinking, oh, I need to preserve my race. I need to do certain things for my race. Oh, and those Jews over there, the Jews are, these globalists are trying to come in and like ruin the white race. So we need to exterminate them all. Like, it's absolutely terrible. This is like directly what leads to Nazi ideologies, these sort of collectivistic mentalities. The reason why the West is great is because we allow people to live their own lives. You have no obligation to future generations, because the future generations don't exist. And if you don't reproduce, then they will never exist, and they would never be able to like feel bad about it because they don't exist. They're not people that you can't betray people that don't exist. Plus, you can't value people in future generations that are super far down the road. Those people are of no value to me. The only people that would be of value to me in future generations would be the people who I live with, like my children or my grandchildren, and like their children and grandchildren too, I guess, essentially, because I mean, like, I want them to live happy lives. But like once you get into like fifth and sixth generation, those people are absolutely meaningless. They hold no value to me. They shouldn't hold no value to you because they have no direct effect on your life or happiness. That is what matters, your life and happiness. And this is and these sort of individualistic mentalities are how we create great societies like the West. Because when you allow individuals to use their own mind, they create amazing things. They trade, they benefit each other. Things are so much better when you are allowed to think for yourself. But when you're convinced that you need to have children to continue civilization, it's not. Because I mean, what about that someone who is trying to pursue a career, trying to make their life as great as possible, as meaningful as possible, and social pressures tell them, no, have a kid, you have to stay home, have a child, or sacrifice your career to have a child. You're telling them to live a less happy life. That's directly what you're telling them. You're telling them, no, you can't achieve happiness. You have to sacrifice for the future generations, people that you will never meet. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say for today. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Peace.